Hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. In Back in History, we go into the archives for documentation and preservation of historical facts for the benefit of today and the benefit of tomorrow. In this edition, we present the story of one of the most vocal voices and defenders of the rights of the people of South Sudan, His Excellency John Garang. We present his birth, his parentage, education, career, involvement in politics, and involvement in armed conflict. We also present the story of how he died in a helicopter crash in South Sudan. John Garang was born in Wangulei village in present-day South Sudan on 23 June 1945. His parents were not blessed with affluence, but life went on in the family and the basic needs of the family were met as much as the family finances could afford. John, however, became an orphan at the age of 10. From then on, his sponsorship was taken up by a relative. In 1962, a civil war broke out in Sudan and school children were displaced, leading to the relocation of John Garang to Tanzania, where he completed his secondary education. At this time, other children of his age were made to take up arms and join in the war, but John was encouraged by close family members to go to school for purpose of securing a brighter future for himself and his community. On completion of his secondary education in Tanzania, John won a scholarship to study for a bachelor's degree in economics at Grinnell College in Iowa in the United States of America. He left Africa to the United States and underwent his studies successfully and graduated with honors. He was again offered scholarship to pursue a master's degree in the University of California, but John turned down the scholarship offer and chose to return to Africa. He sought for admission to study East African Agricultural Economics in the University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and was offered the admission. John arrived Tanzania and carried on with his studies. While there, he joined the University Students African Revolutionary Front. He participated in the activities of the group and did same side by side with his studies. Not long therefrom, John decided to return to his home country of Sudan and to join in the rebel movement to fight in the civil war that had broken out in Sudan since 1962. The war went on, but eventually ended in 1972 with the Addis Ababa Agreement of 1972. One of the conditions for the ceasefire was that the combatants or rebels be absorbed into the Sudanese military and given requisite promotions, salaries, and equal allowances payable to soldiers that had always been in the Sudanese military. This agreement was honored, and John Garang, together with other fighters, was absorbed into the military as a captain. John rose through the ranks and soon became a colonel in the Sudanese army. He remained in the army for 11 years and occupied several leadership and command positions. While in the Sudanese military, he attended several courses at the expense of the Sudanese government. One of the courses he attended was at the Infantry Officers Advanced Course at Fort Benning, Georgia, in the United States of America. While there in Georgia, he obtained a 4-year leave from his government to study for a master's degree in agricultural economics at the Iowa State University. He went further to study for a PhD in economics in the same university. He then returned to Sudan in 1983 and became a senior instructor at the military academy in Wadi Sayadna in Sudan. He remained here and trained several cadets for 4 years. He was later nominated to serve in the military research department as a result of his educational attainment at the army headquarters in Khartoum, capital of Sudan. Sudan from time immemorial has always been discussed at home and abroad along two segments, the northern region and the southern region. The northerners are predominantly Muslims, while the southerners are predominantly Christians. Among them, there are also people who are atheists. John Garang was from the Christian South. In the affairs of Sudan, the dominant region in leadership was the North, and with the passage of time and the reawakening of the consciousness of the people of Sudan, a sense of marginalization and neglect of the South was evoked, thus leading to a rise in agitation for the protection of the interest of the South. Note that the bulk of the oil reserve in Sudan is located in the South. Some exposed persons then began to champion the cause of the South, and one of such persons was Colonel John Garang, PhD. Garang mobilized others to form an armed movement. Garang and his army soon gained control of a large part of the southern region of the country and named it, quote, New Sudan. He had the support of Libya, Uganda, and Ethiopia, who all funded his movements. Garang became a thorn in the flesh of the government of Sudan and also became a force to reckon with. He engaged the government forces in years of fighting for the soul of the South. In 1985, there was election in Sudan, but Garang refused to participate and rather opted to remain a rebel leader. He continued to fight for the interest of the South. With the passage of time and after so much of fighting, the Sudanese government decided to engage in dialogue with John Garang and his group. Proposals were made on both sides. There was then the need for a meeting at a neutral venue to further the conversation. A peace meeting was then agreed upon to hold in Nairobi, Kenya, between John Garang, Sudan's People's Liberation Army, SPLA, and the government of Sudan. The meeting took place on 9th January 2005. Several issues were discussed and agreements reached on a number of issues, one of which was the suspension of hostilities and having a power-sharing agreement in place between President Omar al-Bashir with John Garang serving as the first vice president. The first vice president was the second most powerful office in the country. On 9th July 2005, John Garang was sworn into office as the first vice president of Sudan. Note, however, that John's love for the South was ever present and non-negotiable. He insisted that he should be allowed to serve simultaneously as the Vice President of Sudan and also as Premier of the South. This was totally allowed. John's dream was for the eventual attainment of independence for the South through a peaceful referendum that was to be decided by the people. This was indeed his ultimate dream. But John did not live to see the realization of this dream. In July 2005, John Garang traveled to Uganda for a meeting with President Yoweri Museveni. This was not an official meeting, and for this reason, he did not travel in the presidential jets of Sudan and did not disclose his travel plan to President al-Bashir or any other person in government. He went to Uganda, held the meeting successfully, and then made his way back to Sudan. On his way back from the meeting, the Ugandan presidential helicopter, which carried him from Uganda, crashed, and John Garang died in the crash. The government of Uganda got in contact with the government of Sudan to convey the message of the crash. And when the information was confirmed, the government of Sudan announced as follows, quote, "A Ugandan presidential helicopter has crashed into a mountain range in southern Sudan owing to poor visibility, and this resulted in the death of Dr. John Garang, 6 of his colleagues, and 7 Ugandan crew members." End of quote. Several persons mourned the death of John Garang. His death was something that took a lot of people by surprise. Garang was a pivotal figure in the agitation for the independence of South Sudan. He fought for the right of his people and for the rights of the minorities among them. He also came under close scrutiny on issues of human rights violation. It was rumored in many quarters that his death may have been plotted and carefully executed by some powerful elements who were opposed to John Garang. His death was highly controversial, leaving several questions unanswered. The government of Sudan, however, maintained that the death was caused by an accident and nothing more. His body was recovered and flown to New Kosh, a southern Sudanese settlement which John himself established and developed while alive. On August 3, 2005, a funeral ceremony was held in his honor in Juba. The remains of John Garang was then lowered into the grave, and the dust-to-dust ritual was made in accordance with his Christian faith. This marked the end of the earthly journey of one of Sudan's most visible figures in time of war and in time of peace. Colonel John Garang, PhD, will be remembered by many in Sudan, North and South, and across Africa and the world for many more years to come. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video.